Greetings, Modernism in the Museum students. I hope this finds you well. Welcome to week number 2 of our 8-week journey and exploration of the relationship of the Art Museum to modernism that modernity authors and generates the institution of the Art Museum. During the first week, I gave you a ton of readings and providing you with a broad overall scope of what's at stake. What's a museum? What is an art museum? What is modernity? And how does it help us as art historians and historians of modern art to understand the constitutive role that museums play in the development of artistic practice in modernity? And so, as an institution, in this class, we'll look at the Art Museum as an institution, as a distinctively modern institution. We'll also look at it, as we will this week, as an exhibition space, as a place where works of art breathe, where they are intended to be experienced, and what's implied by that in relationship to other contexts in which the work of art has been historically presented. Within the context of the Renaissance and the Baroque age, for example, and in the Middle Ages, it is the church that is the context within which works of art are interpreted. Or it is in the context of a civic space. So Michelangelo's sculpture of David that was made in the late 15th century was made for the city of Florence to be exhibited and presented in a public space that commemorates and celebrates the Republican ideals of Florence, the shared communal values of Florence as a particular republic that was identifying itself with classical Athens, that it was the unique repository of democracy and a particularly free way of life, given its governance. So within both, in looking at an altarpiece by Masaccio, for example, in a Renaissance church, you are looking at it and experiencing it within the context of religion, liturgical practice. The works of art are intertwined and inseparable from the religion, the institution of religion, of organized religion, of the church and its particular liturgy and sacramental context. With Michelangelo's marble sculpture of David, for example, it is to be experienced in the public sphere, in the public arena that is emphasizing shared civic republican values. In many ways, this particular political realm of the state or the republic is itself is similar to a secular church with a particular secular liturgies, etc. In neither context is the work of art, is the painting or the sculpture encountered and experienced solely by virtue of its aesthetic qualities. Line, form, shape, and most importantly, how it impacts you personally. And it's that space, that experience that is aesthetic, that is only related to art, that separates itself, in which art begins to separate itself, disentangle it from the communal context of religious practice and the communal context of civic political practice. Now, what's interesting is that while in the development of this separate space what the radical Enlightenment philosopher Kant would call disinterested contemplation. Religion and politics being interested. That this disinterested realm of the contemplation of beauty and the reflection of beauty as it's manifest in the work of art demands a space where it can be experienced as such. So it demands, and it's not a neutral space, it's not an open space, but it's a space with its own liturgy. It's a space with its own confessional structure, and that will be the modern art museum. That's the so-called white cube. That's the spaces that the white walls that are providing you, narrowing your focus only on those particular works, not on their participation as means for something else. So Michelangelo's David is in many ways a means to an end. That end is affirming and celebrating and deepening the public civic bond of Florentine virtue. And then in the context of the church, the altarpiece by Masaccio, for example, is a means to an end. That end is deepening and facilitating with the worship of God. In the context of modernity, the work of art begins to have its own autonomous value. But that autonomous value is itself a particular kind of secularized liturgical structure that needs encouragement and shapes and forms the sense that there is something that art offers, that this experience of art offers, that politics and civic virtue and the community structure of the polis and the community structure and the religious structure of the church do not offer. Something different. And that the museum is emerging and filling that space. And so the readings that you will have this week are readings that focus on the museum, not necessarily as a modern institution, but as a modern viewing and experiencing space, and how that space shapes and forms particular kinds of viewers. That is also then when artists are making work for the space in modernity, they're making it not for the church or for the civic component, they're making it for the white cube, the modern space. And so the museum does become in many ways, in very specific ways, a secular religion or a secular politics, which has its own liturgy and its own sacraments. And it's that space then, it's that space where that kind of experience cuts across particular religious, confessional, and political boundaries. And it coincides in many ways. It coincides with developments of Christian theology. The 19th century liberal theologian Schleiermacher tried to find way, as he was preaching from a particular Christian confession, he wanted to find a way of connecting faith to those that didn't share that confession. And he began by building on it, not by the particular denominational or confessional dogmatic foundation. He built on a feeling. And he called the experience of God, focusing on the experience of God and the feeling of God, is this feeling of total dependence. That is the experience of God. So what is interesting is, for Schleiermacher and many liberal theologians, there was something deeper than there was an experience of God that was deeper than or foundational to those other expressions, not just in Christian theology or Christian churches, the various denominational inflections and variations, but even across religions, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, for example, just to focus on the monotheistic, the Abrahamic religions, Islam and Judaism, the religions of the East, Hinduism and Buddhism, much interest of crossover of interreligious and comparative religious analysis in finding a way to find what's common. And the commonness is seen as an experience. There is a particular kind of experience. What is interesting is theologians begin to think about this in relationship to aesthetics. And so then art begins to emerge as that connector that connects you to that deeper foundational feeling or experience that one has, out of which the various organizational or revealed religious expressions take place. And so that is why works of art begin to function, and works of art begin to function in this register, this religious register. And I've also this week included some readings of some of the work that I've published in the context of museums, museum collections, museum curating, just to give you a sense of how I've been thinking about this many years ago. And also then, as you begin to track, what's going to be important then is, with our broad theoretical and historical observations, tracking the development, the intellectual development and the emergence of Alfred Barr as not just an historian of modern art, but as the founding director of the Museum of Modern Art, as this institution itself is born, and then through which that will be able to see Alfred Barr and the Museum of Modern Art as a particular lens through which we'll look at how the Modern Art Museum functions. And keep in mind also that the Louvre's origins as an art museum take place only in the Napoleonic era, in which Napoleon's imperial victories enable him and empower him to appropriate particular works of art from various nations and various cultures and bring them together. And it's the bringing them together that also begins to imply that there is something foundational that links them all together, something called art. So I hope these thoughts are helpful to you. Again, the readings I'm giving you are suggestions. They are do what you can, and then from the readings that you're able to do, respond to the discussion prompt. The prompt gives you a certain sense of some of the emphases that I would like you to concentrate on. But don't feel imprisoned by all of the readings. I'm just trying to give you as much information as possible in the resources that I have, and share those with you so that you have that in your library. And look forward to hearing from me this week about your week 1 discussion prompts. I'll be writing you an email directly with my comments and observations. Also, by the time you read this, I'll be in New York City. I'll be teaching at the King's College throughout the week. My schedule will be rather busy, but it shouldn't delay too much my ability to read and respond to your writings, and also to respond to your questions that you may have. So have a great week. I hope these thoughts are helpful to you, and I look forward to reading last week's discussion prompts. Take care.